Hello, darkness, my old friend, and a good morning to everybody else. So, let's you and me walk all the way down to my bus stop in complete and utter darkness. Well, there are a few street lights, so they'll light the way. And let's talk a little bit about destructuring. Now, this is just me giving you a personal preference of mine, and it's something which I had a vivid conversation with one of my new colleagues about the other day. So, destructuring, I think, is a very nice way to add some syntactic sugar on top of basically, well, let's define it first. Basically, one of the destructuring patterns I've seen being used so far is that you destructure a few properties of a JavaScript object, pull those out so that you can reference them in your code, basically. Now, I argue that destructuring is it's a coding style benefit. There are situations like that specific way of doing it, basically when you have an object and you do the curly braces and then you pull off some properties and then you use them in your code. Those things are like that syntax is very useful for importing libraries, like when you just want to import one function so that, technologies such as Webpack can use tree shaking. Really useful in that scenario. But the one thing we kind of stuck on was that there's a coding practice in the project that I'm working on right now where I don't actually think that this is a practice. I just think that this is something that this colleague of mine kind of just likes, because he uses destructuring, or rather I saw that they were using destructuring for object inputs to a function. And you might ask, Fredrik, why is that a problem? Well, it's not a problem. The problem comes when you are destructuring a lot of properties on the same object. So they, like in the cases that I've seen, they had taken a 2-object input to a function and turned it into a total of roughly 9 properties on said objects. So now I have to look at a very large constructor or like function input and figure out what's going on there, instead of just looking at an object that describes what container or what object that is going to be passed in. And this spurred a little bit of a discussion, and I said, I think that you're overusing destructuring. Like, the idea of destructuring is it's not giving you any benefits apart, in my opinion, from code readability in this specific scenario. There are, as I said, technical advantages if you use it in different contexts, such as with imports. But for input into a function or that type of stuff, is really only syntactic sugar. It doesn't give you anything else. So why would you, by doing what you're doing, you're breaking an even more fundamental rule. You are putting a lot of, if you've read any best practices book, you will sooner or later hear someone say, at max, any function should take 3 input parameters, roughly. So now you're breaking that rule in order to destructure thing, and you're not really getting anything for it. And he said, well, this is the way that we write it everywhere in the code base, and I like to be consistent in the way that I write code. And I said, I can respect that. But from my experience, it is that type of mentality that forces you to become very, very disappointed in software development. And it forces you to, basically, it's the type of mentality that my old colleague Alan had, where you are thinking about code as this beautiful, crisp thing, or as a story that you're writing, or a poem, or a song, or something where you want to have the code aesthetically pleasing or mentally pleasing to you. And that's not what we're going for here, people. We are not trying to create poetry through code. And if you are, I will argue that you should take a look at pragmatism and understanding a even deeper meaning, because the problem with making something beautiful is that your mind will tell you that, oh, I can refactor this or make this consistent and so forth, and there's really no benefit to it. I tried to make that argument. I said, but what you're doing is that you're in order to satisfy that mental thing you have, you're now making the code worse, because you are telling yourself that you want destructuring to be used on all objects that are passed into a function, and when you thought that was the way you wanted to go, you probably destructured an object with maybe 1 or 2 properties, which makes absolute sense, but now you have 9 properties, and it starts to, like, you're actually causing problems because you're not willing to be a little bit flexible and pragmatic about that rule of yours. So, like, what we're actually seeing here is that you're actually making things worse because you've mentally decided that this is the way you want to do things, even though there's no really logical reason for you. I mean, it's not helping you in any way. It's really only making things worse on you. So this function here is now worse because in your mind, it's using a way of working that fits into other places where it's a nicer experience, and that is, to me, it's a little bit insane. And then I shared my personal opinion about how to write code. I said, when you are working on a very large project, your code is sooner or later, at any given time, or rather at some point, going to be in a transition phase. You're going to have parts of the code that you wrote a long time ago, which is not written in the way that you write code today. And the thing is that some developers have this need that they want to feel like, oh, I know new things now, I'm much better at what I do, and therefore I want to have all the code written in that exact way. That's the mental thing. It has nothing to do with the code quality. And I said, what you need to do is to get away from that. You need to stop doing that, and you need to take a look at, as you work on stories and you deliver value to the project, you look at the code and you say, you may go, oh, this is old code, we write this in a different way now. And ask yourself, is this bad code? Or is it just code that is written in a little bit of a different way? Because if it's bad code, you should rewrite it. You should fix it. But if it's just code that is written in a way that you're not writing today, and there's really no problem with it, then it actually is worse for you to rewrite it, because all you're doing is now introducing risk to satisfy that mental need that everything should look the same. And that's actually, in my opinion, a bad thing, because it's the same thing as if I work with a colleague on a project, and every time that person simply doesn't use, say, destructuring, he uses some other way of expressing him or herself. It's like me always rewriting what they're doing to fit my coding style, and even regardless of if the code is good or not. And that's actually, in my opinion, a bad thing, because it's not about having everything being written the exact same way and every single problem being solved the same way. It's about maintainability, and it's about simplicity. And if you want things to be the exact same way all across the board, then use a linter. But I warn you, as I said, odds are that your universal rules for destructuring and all of that stuff is going to face some problems, because we simply don't live in a world where a technical solution fits every type of scenario. It's that simple.